Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us on this really special Easter day as we celebrate Jesus rising again. And what better way to celebrate than to start with a song that is so full of happiness and joy. It talks about the greatest day in history, and that's exactly what Easter celebrates. So let's join together. You can pick up some instruments, you can dance around, and you can sing to Happy Day.
Jesus is alive. The empty cross, the empty grave, life eternal, you have won the day. Shout it out, Jesus is alive. Oh, he's alive. And oh, happy day, you washed my sin away. Joy, perfect peace, earthly pain finally will cease. Celebrate, Jesus is alive. We believe he's alive. And oh, happy day, you washed my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. No, forever I am changed. And oh, what a glorious day, what a glorious way that you have saved me. And oh, what a glorious day, what a glorious name. Whoa. And oh, happy day, you washed my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Your love has rescued me. Forever I am changed. What a glorious, glorious day. I'll never be the same.
Well, wasn't that a brilliant way to start our time together? Now we're going to listen to the story of Easter and remind ourselves where it began. And this is the part of the Easter story that we remember on Good Friday. And it begins in a dark night in a garden.
A dark night in the garden. The wind was picking up now, blowing clouds across the moon, shrouding the garden in darkness. "Stay up with me?" Jesus asked his friends. They said yes, and waited under the olive trees, but they were tired, and soon they fell asleep. Jesus walked ahead, alone, into the dark. He needed to talk to his heavenly Father. He knew it was time for him to die. They'd planned it long ago, he and his father. Jesus was going to take the punishment for all the wrong things anybody had ever done or ever would do. "Papa, Father," Jesus cried, and then he fell to the ground. "Is there any other way to get your children back, to heal their hearts, to get rid of the poison?" But Jesus knew there was no other way. All the poison of sin was going to have to go into his own heart. God was going to pour into Jesus' heart all the sadness and brokenness in people's hearts. He was going to pour into Jesus' body all the sickness in people's bodies. God was going to have to blame his son for everything that had gone wrong. It would crush Jesus. But there was something else, something even more horrible. When people ran away from God, they lost God. It was what happened when they ran away. Not being close to God was like a punishment. Jesus was going to take that punishment. Jesus knew what that meant. He was going to lose his Father, and that, Jesus knew, would break his heart in two. Violent sobs shook Jesus' whole body. And then Jesus was quiet, like a lamb. "I trust you, Papa," he said. "Whatever you say, I will do." Suddenly, through the trees, a glitter of starlight flashed off steel. Into the quiet garden came whispers, muffled voices, clanking metal, and the sound of boots marching. Jesus stood up. He woke his friends. "Now is the time," he said gently. "Everything that was written about me, what God has been telling his people all through the long years, it's all coming true." And into the night, with burning torches and lanterns, with swords and clubs and armour, they came, an army of soldiers. Judas led them straight to Jesus so they could arrest him. And Jesus was waiting for them. Peter leapt up, took a sword and tried to defend Jesus. He sliced off the guard's ear. Jesus immediately touched the guard and healed him. "Peter," he said, "this is not the way." You see, Peter didn't realise that no army, no matter how big, could ever arrest Jesus, not unless Jesus let them. And then Jesus, who had never done anything except love people, was arrested as if he were a criminal. Jesus' friends were afraid, so they ran away and hid in the dark shadows. The guards marched Jesus off and took him to the leaders. And the leaders put Jesus on trial. "Are you the Son of God?" they asked. "I am," Jesus said. "Who do you think you are to call yourself God? You must die for calling yourself the Son of God." Only the Romans were allowed to kill prisoners, so the leaders made a plan. "We'll tell the Romans, this man wants to be our king, and then they will crucify him." But it would be all right. It was God's plan. "It was for this reason that I was born into the world," Jesus said.
Oh dear, well, that doesn't seem like such a happy day after all. But we know that that isn't how the story ends. So let's get back to the story and see what happened next.
The sun stops shining. "So, you're a king, are you?" the Roman soldiers jeered. "Then you'll need a crown and a robe." They gave Jesus a crown made out of thorns and put a purple robe on him and pretended to bow down to him. "Your Majesty," they said, and then they whipped him and spat on him They didn't understand that this was the Prince of Life, the King of heaven and earth, who had come to rescue them. The soldiers made him a sign, "Our King," and nailed it to a wooden cross. They walked up a hill outside the city. Jesus carried the cross on his back. Jesus had never done anything wrong, but they were going to kill him the way criminals were killed. They nailed Jesus to the cross. "Father, forgive them," Jesus gasped. "They don't understand what they're doing." "You say you've come to rescue us," people shouted, "but you can't even rescue yourself." But they were wrong. Jesus could have rescued himself. A legion of angels would have flown to his side if he'd called them. "If you really were the Son of God, you could just climb down off that cross," they said. And of course, they were right. Jesus could have just climbed down. Actually, he could have just said a word and made it all stop, like when he healed that little girl and stilled the storm and fed 5,000 people. But Jesus stayed. You see, they didn't understand. It wasn't the nails that kept Jesus there. It was love. "Papa!" Jesus cried, frantically searching the sky. "Papa, where are you? Don't leave me!" And for the first time, and the last, when he spoke, nothing happened. Just a horrible, endless silence. God didn't answer. He turned away from his boy. Tears rolled down Jesus' face, the face of the one who would wipe away every tear from every eye. Even though it was midday, a dreadful darkness covered the face of the world. The sun couldn't shine. The earth trembled and quaked. The great mountains shook. Rocks split in two until it seemed that the whole world would break, that creation itself would tear apart. The full force of the storm of God's fierce anger at sin was coming down on his own Son instead of his people. It was the only way that God could destroy sin and not destroy his children whose hearts were filled with sin. And then Jesus shouted out in a loud voice, "It is finished!" And it was. He had done it. Jesus had rescued the whole world. "Father," Jesus cried, "I give you my life." And with a great sigh, he let himself die. Strange clouds and shadows filled the sky, purple, orange, black, like a bruise. Jesus' friends gently carried Jesus. They laid him in a new tomb carved out of rock. What had gone wrong? What did it mean? They didn't know anything anymore, except they did know that their hearts were breaking. "That's the end of Jesus," the leaders said. But just to be sure, they sent strong soldiers to guard the tomb. They hauled a huge stone in front of the door to the tomb so that no one could get in or out.
As I said, that's the part of the story that we remember on Good Friday. And if the story ended there, then we would have nothing to celebrate today. It really wouldn't be a happy day. In fact, you may wonder, why do we call that Good Friday? Nothing about that story seems very good. Well, it's what happens next that makes that so good. Jesus made that sacrifice for us, and because he rose from the grave 3 days later, anything is possible. All hope is ours. And I think it's important after watching that part of the story to remind ourselves that Jesus is not dead anymore. Jesus is alive. So we're going to sing another song, and I again hope you can find some instruments, get up, sing, join in and dance, because Jesus is alive today. Well, we've just sung about the fact that Jesus is alive, but it's time for my favourite part of the Easter story. We're going to go back and see what happened next, because Jesus did not stay in the grave, and that is why we're celebrating today.
God's wonderful surprise. Jesus' friends were sad. They would never see their best friend again. How could this happen? Wasn't Jesus the rescuer? The king that God had promised? It wasn't supposed to end like this. Yes, but whoever said anything about the end? Just before sunrise, on the third day, God sent an earthquake and an angel from heaven. When the guards saw the angel, they fell down with fright. The angel rolled the huge stone away, sat on top of it, and waited. At the first glimmer of dawn, Mary Magdalene and other women headed to the tomb to wash Jesus' body. The early morning sun slanted through the ancient olive trees, drops of dew glittering on leaves and grasses, like little tears everywhere. The friends walked quietly along the hilly path, through the olive groves, until they reached the tomb. And immediately they noticed something odd. It was wide open. They peered through the opening into the dark tomb. But wait, Jesus' body was gone. And something else. A shining man was there with clothes made from lightning. "Don't be scared," the angel said. But they couldn't help it. They screamed anyway. The angel asked them, "What are you doing here? This is a tomb, and tombs are for dead people." The women couldn't speak. Jesus isn't dead anymore, he said. He's alive again. And their hearts leapt. And then the angel laughed with such gladness that they felt for a moment as if they had woken from a nightmare. The other women rushed home, but Mary stayed behind. How could it be true? Jesus was definitely dead. How could he be alive? Just then Mary heard someone else in the garden. Perhaps it's the gardener, she thought. He'll know where Jesus' body is. I don't know where Jesus is, Mary said urgently. I can't find him. But it was all right. Jesus knew where she was, and he had found her. Mary! Only one person said her name like that. She could hear her heart thumping. She turned around. She could just make out a figure. She shaded her eyes to see and thought she was dreaming. But she wasn't dreaming. She was seeing. Jesus! Mary fell to the ground. Sudden tears filled her eyes and great sobs shook her whole body. And all she wanted in that moment was to cling to Jesus and never let him go. You'll be able to hold on to me later, Mary, Jesus said gently, and always be close to me. But now, go and tell the others that I'm alive. Well, Mary ran and ran all the way to the city. She had never run so fast or so far in all her life. She felt she could have run forever. She didn't even feel like her feet touched the ground. The sun seemed to be dancing and gleaming and bounding across the sky, racing with her and shining brighter than she could ever remember in the clear, fresh air. And it seemed to her that morning as she ran, almost as if the whole world had been made anew, almost as if the whole world was singing for joy, the trees, tiny sounds in the grass, the birds, her heart. Was God really making everything sad come untrue? Was he really making even death come untrue? She couldn't wait to tell Jesus' friends. They won't believe it, she laughed. And she was right, of course.
Well, isn't it wonderful? What a thing to celebrate. Jesus not only was alive back then, he's still alive today. And what does that mean for us today as we celebrate? Well, as we heard in the story, because Jesus rose from the dead, all of the sad and bad things that we see around us in the world have begun to come untrue. We begin to unpick them and we have hope that one day everything is going to be made right again. What it really means is that Jesus has become the King of the whole world. The King of you, the King of me, the King of all creation. And because he's King, there is hope. Because he is King, nothing that we face will ever be too big. And as we finish, we're going to sing about the fact that Jesus is the King of us. And this song I really love. It looks back at some stories in the Old Testament and it says Jesus was king then, and it says that Jesus is king today. It's more than just history. He does this for us. So let's join together for our final song, that Jesus is the King of me.
The king of the giants, my God's the king of the lions, my God's the king of the creatures of the deep, my God's the king of me. Have you heard the story about my friend King Dave? Wouldn't let the giant stand in his way. He said, hand me my sling, cause he's not that tall. My God is bigger and I watch him fall. My God's the king of the giants, My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. Have you heard the one about this guy called Dan? Yes, he was a mighty holy praying man. They said throw him to the den of the scary beasts, but God saved a hero from the lion's teeth. Yeah! My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. This is more than history. You will do the same for me, like Jonah and the whale at sea. When I'm lost and afraid, all alone in the dark, you're with me. Oh, you're with me. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. My God's the king of me.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. I know that you're all off for Easter holidays now, and I hope you have a really lovely few weeks. I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon. Bye.